So first up, little exercise on your own. There's pens and paper provided. What I'd like you to do is write down the word or few words which best describes you or your practice, and then a sentence or two which sums up what you do. I've put up here some examples from gallery websites which describe in very brief terms an artist who shows with them. So, for example, Vicken Parsons is a British artist who studied at the Slade School of Fine Art, London. She makes small, intimate paintings on wood panel using thin layers of oil paint. Her subjects are usually of landscapes or architectural spaces, some remembered, others imagined. Rana Begum is influenced by the geometric abstraction of minimalism and constructivism and the work of artists such as Agnes Martin, Donald Judd, Tess Jarre, Joseph and Annie Albers. She works with industrial materials such as stainless steel, aluminium, copper, brass, glass and wood to make sculptures and reliefs that explore geometry, color and light. Light reflects and absorbs on fluorescent colored surfaces to create changing sensations as viewers move in and around her works and the space they occupy. She is inspired by urban architecture and her childhood memories of the geometric patterns of traditional Islamic art and architecture. And then the third example, Bob and Roberta Smith, aka Patrick Brill, is a British contemporary artist, activist, art education advocate, writer and musician, and a well-known and vocal campaigner on art school education. He is known for his slogan art that uses text as an art form, creating colourful slogans on banners and placards. He sees art as an important element in democratic life. Central to his thinking is the idea that campaigns are extended artworks, which include a variety of consciousness-raising artifacts. So, what do you do? How would you describe yourself? How would you sum it up in a few words? I'm not going to ask you to share what you've written down, so I'm not going to put you on the spot. But out of interest, hands up, who is a painter? Hands up, who is a printmaker? Hands up, who's a sculptor?
Dabble.
Dabble? Dabble's all right. Hands up, who works with video or photography? Hands up, who's an installation artist? Performance artist?
Hand up here for video photography.
Oh, excellent. Welcome, online viewers. Okay. So, like I say, I'm not gonna get you to read out what you've written, but it's just a way of getting you to start thinking about what is it that you do. How would you describe your practice? And therefore, how do you start presenting your work? So you might present your work on a website or social media for a commission, an open exhibition proposal to a purchaser or customer, a curator or a funder. Photographing your work well, both individual pieces and of exhibitions or displays, is vital to representing it clearly and successfully. Now, I'm sure many of you will know this already. It's, you know, this is kind of basic stuff. to some extent. But in my experience of being a selector on open exhibitions, there are lots of people, lots of artists who make submissions which fall down because of poor photography in presenting their work. So here's some do's and some don'ts when photographing your work. I mean, you look at those and you think, gosh, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? But believe me, people do it. Avoid reflections on glass, uneven lighting, shadows, out of focus, surrounding clutter, and awkward angles or cropping. Photograph a work before putting it in a frame. Find a space with good lighting and a clean wall. Use a decent camera, although smartphones can be fine. So you don't need, these days, a tripod, lights, and a SLR camera. You can. Well, yeah, it is if you yeah. Or,
you still get a wobble.
That's true. But phones are good enough to take decent pictures. And if your lighting in the room, your ambient lighting is good enough, it's fine. So I'm not suggesting that you have to spend loads of money on expensive equipment, but, you know, be aware of these avoid these pitfalls. We all have. So these are a bit better. I mean, this is a photograph of a charity shop painting. So don't look at the artwork too much, but your artwork might not be framed, so you can present it as an uncropped image, as on the right. If it is framed, you can choose to include it in the image and make sure the frame enhances the artwork. This one's a bit grubby. As I said, it's from a charity shop. So I think in terms of an open exhibition, let's say, the image on the right is better, and I'd probably think about reframing that painting. These photographs may be fine as a lifestyle image, if you like, for a website or a magazine, but not for a submission for an artwork to an open exhibition, unless the sofa, the clock, the ornaments, etc., are an intrinsic part of the work. So the photograph on the left, I'm assuming the artwork is the framed thing on the wall above the sofa, but that image you wouldn't submit for an open exhibition because the sofa's not part of it. And then the image on the right, there is a picture on the wall, again, which is just a charity shop purchase, but there's ornaments and other clutter. Now, is or is that not one work? If it's not, then crop to the image of the painting itself. Consider how a frame enhances your work or detracts from it. How do you want it to look? Some customers may express a preference. It can be expensive, especially with non-reflective glass, but if you value your artwork, it is worth presenting it professionally. And, it's kind of trial and error sometimes. Over the years, for my own work, I've tried all sorts of different frames, from cheap or found or, hand-me-down frames through to bespoke. And the best always is getting a bespoke frame for your artwork. If you value your artwork, you need to frame it properly. So and the choice is yours, really, but if you think an ornate gold frame on the left suits your work, then go for it. But I suspect that's probably not the direction to go in. The black frame in the sort of the third image along is probably a bit too thick, a bit too chunky. And so you have to be aware of over-framing stuff as well. So in my mind, the one on the right is the better image because it gives the painting, which is quite small, space to breathe. So it includes a mount and then a very thin frame. But it's something to consider. It's something to consider. And obviously, if you're selling a piece to a customer, or you're making a commission for a customer or purchaser, they might want a particular frame to go with their room, and that's fine. That's fair enough. So these are framed digitally. You know, I've just picked off the internet different kinds of frames and dropped the picture in them. And this is similarly a virtual exhibition. This exhibition never took place in a real gallery. But I've found it helps to imagine what your work is going to look like in an exhibition, in a gallery space. And, you know, you can do that now. I mean, these are just, I've not even got Photoshop. This is just done on MS Publisher. But it helps me to think through what my work will look like and what relationships there are between different works, and how some works talk well with each other and how other pieces conflict. So you can start to consider a body of work for an exhibition, perhaps. So we've kind of mentioned individual works that you might submit to an open exhibition, but imagine if you were given a gallery space, what would your work look like? How would you present it? And I found this is quite a nice way of thinking through that. So we talked about framing, but large works on paper and textiles can be displayed unframed. They can be fixed to the wall using pins or clips, or even suspended. And it's quite common for printmakers to display unframed works using magnet system. So the work on the left by Jenny Robinson are very large prints on a kind of tough but very thin paper, and they work as suspended images. They're in a sequence, so they're suspended close together. The middle slide is work by Danielle Creenone, and those large bits of paper are secured to the wall by magnets. So they're not framed. So you put a screw in the wall, put your print against the screws, and then the magnet will secure top and bottom of the corners the paper on the wall. So that's quite a common way of displaying large work and avoids the expense of big frames. Unframed or canvases can be framed. So Stephen Heaton here is framed his with a very simple box frame, which has a slight gap between the edge of the canvas and the wood profile. But large canvases can be displayed unframed. Make sure, in that case, if you're working on large canvases, that they're not wonky or warped, because again, that can let down your work. And I've hung plenty of paintings where you think it's level and you look at it and actually the canvas isn't square, or it's coming away from the wall at one corner because it's warped. The photograph in the middle, which is an exhibition I curated a few years ago, it really annoys me. The photograph really annoys me because you can see a bit of light from the tracking at the top. You can see the light switches. You know, there's interruptions to this image, which on reflection are really annoying. And I should have taken a much better photograph of that exhibition. But it then raises the question of, once, you know, you framed your work, you put it on the wall in a gallery, documenting it is really important, and documenting it well. And again, it's something that you can do. If you've got lots of money, you can pay a professional photographer to do it, but just be aware of all those kind of things that, yeah, get in the way.
So you can tell it's in situ, it's not really good.
No, well, that's right. That's it.
But you can tell it with an actual.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think, you know, photographing your work in real space is important because it gives that sense of scale. So, you know, when we receive exhibition proposals, for example, I want to know what this work is going to look like. I can see a cropped image of a beautiful painting or print, or but I need to have that sense of how's it going to sit on an 8-foot wall or a 10-foot wall, or do you know what I mean? So, you know, that documentation of your work is important as well. We've touched a little bit on domestic settings, and obviously a client or customer or commissioner has something to say to you about how they want their work. A gallery exhibition might look quite different from a domestic setting. And here, the design of the room focuses our attention on the work. So Christea Roberts Gallery in London, they show some really interesting artists. Patrick Heron is one of their estate artists. In this photograph, you can see that everything to do with the walls, the floor, the lighting is almost invisible, and your attention is on the work as well, the work itself. Again, the framing is designed to focus attention on the artwork and not detract from the beautiful abstract color prints. Consider display of 3D works. Is the plinth or shelf an integral part of the artwork and its presentation? If it is, then on the left, to me, that suggests a work has 3 plinths and a head on top of the middle one. If those 2 side plinths are not part of the work, then photograph it as in the middle photograph. And if the plinth is not an integral part of the work, then all you need to focus on is the head itself, the sculpture itself. For some artists, the shelf and the plinth are part of their work. So Chaim Steinbach on the left, Rebecca Warren on the right. The shelves, the trolleys, the wheels, they are an integral part of the work itself. So if you're presenting work to a gallery, or you're installing your own show in a gallery, or an artist-run space, or even an empty shop, sometimes you have to improvise. Again, if you've not got the resources to make bespoke plinths for your work, sometimes you just have to find things. Now, as a curator, I quite like that, working with artists on virtually no budget, because it becomes quite a playful process of them presenting the work and kind of working with the artist and thinking, well, how will this look if we did that? Or what about putting these 2 together? What about putting that high and that low? So the 2 slides on the left are a show I curated with an artist called Salah Rifat in Huddersfield. And she had a kind of extensive range of work, some of which was framed, some of which was unframed. But the feeling of what she was doing was kind of process. There were a lot of unfinished things, and I suggested that becomes the focal point for the show. It's about the process. So the framed works, the kind of the finished things, if you like, didn't feel appropriate. So we started playing with unframed works, magnets, and hanging works on card, which had cutouts and painting on the reverse side, fixing them to the wall at an inch or 2 distance. So that some of the works had a glow around them as the fluorescent painting on the back of the image or the artwork kind of was reflected on the white wall. We found a mirror at the back of this disused shop, and I said, let's try it out. Put your more sculptural constructions, let's put them on the floor on a mirror, and that will create a kind of depth, a spatial feeling to the work which is different from them just being on the wall. So they became floor pieces. Now, they were never made with that in mind, but the elements started to kind of fit together, if you like, and the floor and the walls became significant parts of the exhibition. So we had fun. On the right, the two slides of a drawing by Naomi Kendrick, which was the drawing show at the Turnpike last year. She didn't have a plinth with the work, so I said, well, we'll find something. found some table legs and a drawing board. We spray painted the legs the same color as the walls in the gallery and created this bespoke kind of table for the work, and it worked really well. So sometimes there are playful, improvised solutions to presenting your work, and in some ways you can't predict that, and it's all part and parcel of putting on a show. In the olden days, 250 years ago at the Royal Academy, this is what it would have looked like. Paintings from wall to ceiling. And as you can see, the exhibition is eminently splendid. There is contour and keeping and grace and expression and all the varieties of artificial excellence. Some years later, at the National Gallery, paintings were hung near at eye level, and red was the colour chosen for the walls, complementing the gold frames and cooler colours within the paintings. The Royal Academy still likes to fill their walls with stuff. Obviously, it receives thousands of entries. How does your work stand out and catch viewers' eyes when its presentation is out of your control? Has anyone ever entered or got in the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition?
No, I submitted this year and didn't get through. Of course, the Royal Campion Conway.
Yeah.
And like you say, you have no control over where it goes.
No.
But mine was in the stairwell because they used every available space. So it was downstairs, up the stairwell, round here, and everywhere else. Yeah. So sometimes when you've put your heart and soul into a work, you've framed it beautifully, you've spent loads of money on it, you've spent loads of money on your exhibition fee submission. You've spent. Well, you had to look at it for that. That's fortuitous then, yeah. But you can, you spend hours on something and you put it out into the world, and then it's kind of out of your control, and yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, exactly. You've done what you can, and then you trust the exhibition, the gallery, the curators to make it work, and to show it to its best advantage. When an artist is in control, so this is Malevich in 1915. So the artist becomes the curator. The placing of the black square in a position usually occupied by icons in Russian homes caused a scandal. Some years later, the Malevich exhibition at the Stedelijk Museum 10 years ago. And then the same exhibition being installed at Tate Modern. Slightly different coloured wall, slightly different position, but the feeling is there, isn't it? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that first photograph, that looks kind of old-fashioned,
Well, they are, yeah. It's more of a domestic setting, and you can see the way things are hung. They're kind of tilting off the wall, aren't they? They're on strings. They're on those hooks. They're tilting away from the wall. We tend not to hang things like that anymore. Things are kind of flat. If you've got security fittings which can be hidden behind the frame, you don't see the mirror plates, or all of that kind of stuff. So it's a very pared down, clean display, which reflects the geometry within the work itself. But I quite like this one because that's the exhibition organizer starting to place things and working out where things go. So we had my virtual exhibition kind of game. This is in a real space where the bits of cardboard are the same size as the painting. So it's that process that I quite enjoy. I enjoy putting on a show and working with an artist and having that discussion, that exchange about what's going to work where. Like I say, that was at Tate Modern. When it doesn't work, when you feel things, you might have put something in a show and you feel really let down, it's just, I find that really sad. I find that a really sad picture. I'm not going to, well, I'm not going to go on about it, but it look at the difference. To me, the difference is sort of self-evident. But I suppose, from my point of view, it's taken me a lot of years to get to the point where I am now, where my critical eye is sharper than it was 20 years ago. So it comes with experience. It comes with trying things out. You won't get it right first time. No. So if the pictures are on the wall in a gallery, let's say, what do you say about them? Or what do other people say about them? What information do you need to provide or understand about your own practice that will help people looking at your work understand it better? So labels can be important. And I know that visitors coming to the Turnpike will often like quite a lot of information about the work. And it's a balancing act between providing very little and providing way too much, because you don't want the words to substitute the artwork itself. You don't want the words to explain away the artwork so that people don't bother to look at the artwork. So here are some examples that I just photographed at the Tate last year. Mona Hatoum at the top. You've got your title, you've got the year it was made, the medium, it's a print, so it's a limited edition of 20, signed and numbered, and it's for sale. So for £2,000, you can buy a Mona Hatoum print. If you remember, you can get it for 1,800. But basic information, there's no information about what the picture is about. Victor Passmore, bottom left. Name of the artist, you've got the title, the year it was made, the medium, oil paint on canvas, and then a bit of description about his work. Most of Passmore's square motif works date from 1948 to 50. They are constructions of shapes such as spirals, rectangles, triangles, and circles, which can be found in nature, and so on. So there's a bit of information which kind of lets people into looking at an abstract work. And then some different kinds of labels. The one on the bottom right, or two labels on the bottom right, are about a Winifred Nicholson painting. And that's more the curator's voice. Is color, light, or shape more important in a painting? You get a quote from Nicholson: "I was using color to express color. The form could take whatever the form the color wanted." And then it's more of there's a different kind of way in, I suppose, to looking at the work. The emphasis is on the subject of color in her work. So you're kind of focusing on a particular aspect of it. but how would you label your work? You know, date, title, medium. Is there anything else you could say that enables people to look more closely, or to look again, or to get a deeper insight into what you do? Which leads us on to kind of statements. And a statement about your work is a really hard thing to write, and it can change over time and change for different audiences or purposes. So here are three statements that are picked off the internet, artists that I know, but they're out there in the public domain. 40, 50 words. Top one: central to my practice is the use of personal, private, and inherited objects. I cherish the detritus of everyday life with its moments of pathos or beauty. I'm curious about how to repair, celebrate, and articulate memories manifested through drawing, assemblage, and display. These are the small incidents of life marked in the present. Second one: I work in a variety of different ways: sculpture, installation, drawing, and predominantly textiles. My practice is process-driven and centers around color, shape, form, and materials. I often work with vivid colors, investigating how these respond to their surroundings. I use materials as a drawing tool and often create work both spontaneously and subconsciously through play. And then a third one: through my practice, I examine the complexities of living in the Anthropocene, engaging with ecology, anthropology, and metaphysical theory to explore the duality between culture and the natural world. My artworks take the form of sculpture, installation, digital work, and socially engaged interventions. So what is an artist's statement? And as I was researching, I could have gone down the route of AI, and I wouldn't have to, it would have been generated for me from everything in the internet. And actually we tried this. Charlotte tried it on this presentation, presenting your work, and it was just instant. And actually some of it was all right, but of course what it doesn't have and what it can't give you at the moment are those images that I've shared. It can give you some of the words and some of the kind of key themes. Yeah, interesting. So this is borrowed from Alison Stanfield at artbizsuccess.com, because as I was reading what she'd written, I thought, yes, I agree. So okay, I've pretty much borrowed from Alison. But all of what she writes about in making an artist statement rings true to me. So there are no strict guidelines for an artist statement, but it should be a written document that guides viewers to a better understanding of your work. You have to make sense of your art before you can share your message in other formats or through social media channels. This is accomplished through the process of writing your artist statement, and it is a process. So that's why I asked you at the beginning, what is it you do? You know, what do you call yourself, and what is it that you do? It is the start of a process. These slides actually we'll send them to you, won't we? Yeah. So you don't have to write all this now. You don't have to write it down. We'll send you these. Yeah. Yeah. Above all, your artist statement should compel viewers to look back at your work. And that's something I've said already. You know, you don't want your statement to explain away or be so irrelevant or academic that people forget to look back at your work. There's that conversation between the two things, the thing that you make, the art, and what you say about it. And sometimes it's best to keep the statement pretty simple, pretty clear. You don't need to kind of obfuscate things and make it too wordy and too academic, you know, because if there is a disconnect between the writing and the artwork, it's like, for me, from my point of view as a curator, it's like, well, I'm not quite sure I believe you. I'm not quite sure I believe what you're writing, what you're saying, or I'm not quite convinced by the work now, because you're claiming one thing, but I'm looking at something else. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah.
Suppose the statement is to generate curiosity in the art, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So there are key things that you can include in your statement which open up an understanding rather than close it down. So, you know, don't dredge up past work that's no longer pertinent. Don't include anything about teachers and the historical figures who influenced you, which actually that goes against one of those first statements that I put up from Rana. Yeah, but that's the gallery writing about the artist and situating her work within a context. So it's, you know, there are all sorts of variations depending on who you're writing for. Yeah, keep it short. Most artist statements don't need to take up more space than 1 or 2 paragraphs, about 100 words. Think of your statement as a connecting device, something that connects viewers' experiences with your art. And then she goes on with some top tips. So don't say your art is unique. That is it's meaningless. It really is meaningless. Instead of using the word unique, describe your work in a way that makes the reader think it's unique, identifying its distinguishing characteristics. So there is something about what you do which is unique, which is, you know, you do it in a way that nobody else does. But to say that your work is unique is making a claim for it that, yeah, it's difficult to believe. Yeah. So remove generalized or lazy phrases that many artists default to, such as "I'm excited by," "I've always been an artist," you know, "I have to make art," "My work is about the human condition." It's, yeah. Beware of redundancy. Say it one way and move on. Get rid of lists. Reduce the number of personal pronouns. And then after you've cleaned up these 5 things, give yourself time to step away from what you've written. And when you return to the document, look it over and read it out loud. Does it make sense when you read it out loud? Are these the words you would speak naturally? It is a statement after all. Reading your draft aloud will help you uncover any odd passages. So the process is not dissimilar from making an artwork. You do something, you step back, you reflect, you tweak it, it's a dialogue, isn't it, between you and your print, your painting, your sculpture, your photography, whatever it might be. And yeah, it's you're constantly revising and improving. Same with a statement, you know, write it down, walk away, come back, read it. Is this rubbish or does it make sense? Make adjustments. And then think about that statement as the basis for something like an exhibition proposal to a gallery, or that is required for an open exhibition. And you can expand it or reduce it, or but it is worth doing, I think, because if you're, I don't know, stuck in a lift with Maria Balshaw and she says, "I hear you're an artist, what is it you do?" What would you say?
Your elevator pitch.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd have to keep pressing up and down on the link.
I probably want to get
hours to explain. I'm stop from getting out.
I might want to get out of the next floor. I don't...
Oh no.
I hope this helps. And the advice that I'm giving is not to suggest that you change what art you make or the way that you make it. It's simply to encourage you to present it in the best way you can, which might be as a digital submission to a panel of judges, an image which engages a number of different audiences, and as a physical artwork in a gallery setting. There are resources out there, plenty of good resources online. The image on the right is of a couple of books that I got from Axis Web. So Axis Web is a membership organization where you can showcase your work. So if you've not got your own website, for example, you could put work on Axis Web. I think there's a selection process, so there's some quality control going on, but they are increasingly providing resources for artists, online talks, publications. Yeah, AN Artist Newsletter used to be the kind of the leading membership organization for that. I think Axis Web have upped their game. So I've read through these two publications pretty quickly. Yeah, a lot of it's fine, a lot of it is irrelevant. It depends where you are in your career and where you want to go, how commercial you want to be or non-commercial. You know, there's all sorts of, the art world is so broad, but it's about you finding your place within it, and leading a happy, productive life.
Got a question from online, Matt.
Yep.
What is your advice for presenting when submitting non-traditional work? So, for example, a performance or process that you've documented.
So the advice is to however you document it or present it, give that sense of what it looks like. So a video is a video, and we can look at that on a screen, on a monitor. But is it important that the presentation, the physical presentation of that thing, i.e. a large monitor, is that integral to the piece, or is it a projection? So to give that sense of what does this thing look like in a gallery, as a performance, as an installation. It's and that might, I mean, we've talked about single images of individual artworks. When your work is multifaceted, a number of different images might be needed to communicate what it looks like, how it's presented.
So welcome back, everyone. We're going to make a start. Everyone's joined us back online as well. Welcome back. So I'm going to cover the second section today, which is about promoting your work. So equally the second part of the puzzle to presenting your work. It doesn't come naturally to everyone, this, and I really appreciate that. And I think we can get kind of bogged down in thinking I should be on every social media platform, I should be making flyers and posters, I should be putting it everywhere. And what I'm hopefully going to kind of go through today is sort of teach you how to focus your efforts so that you can make the most of your time and kind of get the most back out of it and really understand who you're trying to promote your work to and why. So I'm going to go through these points here and then we'll open it up for some questions. I'll share these afterwards. We'll probably pop them on the website or we can email it out to everyone as well. So hopefully that's useful, and I'll be around afterwards if anyone wants a little chat as well. So to start with, what are you doing it for? And that is, what are you promoting your work for? So different to why you're making your art, why are you choosing to promote it? Consider these things and consider that you might kind of match with a few of these. There might be some that aren't on here, some motivations that aren't on here, but consider how you prioritize those goals around your promotion and how to navigate that. So for example, if you want to sell your work, is that your main priority? You want to focus on where that audience is going to be to sell your work. you're going to focus on what platforms is best to put it on. If your work is mostly around activism and it's a need to kind of be part of a conversation, for example, with the wider world, you might want to consider like your voice, for example, your tone of voice in how you promote your work and where that voice sits and what groups you're part of and how that all kind of fits together. Equally, if you're doing it for education and skill sharing, it's making the right connections. So you wouldn't post what you do everywhere. You target schools, for example, educators, community groups, where your work is most going to be seen and suit that audience. So take a few minutes. I'm going to go run through this exercise. This is 3 steps, I think, that should help you identify your target audience. So consider in the first instance, what is your interest? So what theme is most common in your work? How do you, for example, make work about the environment and nature? Do you paint pictures of animals? Do you photograph portraits? Do you create immersive installations? Step 2, identify your favourite subject. So this is sort of more detailed of that theme. What's your kind of core niche within that? So for example, I create work about the impact of plastics on the ocean. I paint pictures of horses. I photograph athletes specifically. I create sci-fi installations. And step 3, identify your style. So how are those things portrayed in your work? And that's everything from the colours that you use, the scale of your work, the tools and the medium, the way that you create it, and style. So is it impressionistic, realistic, realist, for example? Is it digital photography? So take a few minutes and just consider that about your own work. It might be come really easy to you. It might not do, depending on, the complexity of your work and, the amount of research that's behind it, or, just your experience that you've been through. But try and keep it simple for yourself. So I don't know if you want to take a few minutes to just consider that. So basically, to put quite simply, your target audience is the group of people that prefers the type of artwork that you create. And that might seem really obvious, but I think as artists, we've got multiple thoughts going on all the time about things that we're interested in, and we kind of, you bring it all together. And I think it's really important sometimes to just bring it back to that simplicity of what exactly is it about? What exactly does it look like? And who might kind of feel some affinity with that? So these are the people that you want to put the most time and effort into. You'll find these people are most likely to buy your paintings or drawings or artwork. And these people will match those answers in some way to what you've just gone through. So the more closely their answers match yours, the more likely you are to make a sale with them, gain a follower, a subscriber, or have success with applying for an opportunity. So the same thing applies with who you're applying for commissions with or opportunities. Does your work suit that style of gallery, the audience that they have that come into their gallery? And it's about providing you with the best chance of kind of just connecting with people. Again, this isn't a guarantee, and it doesn't mean that you can't promote your work to other people, but it's recognizing that as an artist, you have limited time. And I recognize that in terms of marketing and social media and all of that, it can be quite overwhelming. So this is just how to kind of just really focus what you're doing. And just remember that for every potential audience that you're promoting to, for every kind of question that they differ from those 3 points, the less likely you probably are to connect. So to take your example, if you paint pictures of horses, for example, and you have a passion about horses because you've got a personal interest in horses, consider, where do people like you, where do they hang out? Where do they go? What events do they go to? Do they go to horse shows? Are they on Facebook groups that are about horses? The style of your work as well. So if it's, if it's impressionistic, people might be interested in, who are more interested in impressionist paintings about nature, might have an interest in your work, but you don't want to put your full focus into them. You probably want to direct it towards people that are really passionate about horses. So this diagram here is just a really simple way of showing you that that small audience there in the center, that's your closest match. That's where you want to put your most effort into. And it might seem counterproductive to not send your work and everything out to everyone, to lots of people. But to put it bluntly, you're potentially wasting your time and your efforts just blanket approaching everyone. So consider how you kind of segment your audience and who they are specifically. There's a second stage to that. So you might have someone, for example, that is interested in environmental work and landscapes, maybe that have animals in. They might be interested in your work as well. So do put effort into them, but keep a focus on that core audience, because that's where you probably have most success. Yeah. And that wider audience one. So for example, let's take Martin's example of an open exhibition. That might be where you're hitting a wider audience, because you're going to get all kinds of people coming to that exhibition. But that's where you use the tools that Martin's taught you in how to talk about your work, to really speak to those potential audiences that are your target audience that come into the gallery. So it's just piecing those things together.
I mean, generally, you need someone who's interested in art, don't you?
Yeah.
It's not a question of art, but like art in general, like art, they're keen to buy art.
Yeah, definitely.
They value it.
But again, an interest in art is that wider audience.
Yeah.
So you've got to bring it back to you specifically, and those 3 questions about your work, and come back to it again and again as you make new work, and just keep revisiting that, because honestly, it will help you just connect better with people. You'll start to find that you'll get more feedback, you'll get more comments on your work, you'll get more people kind of coming through with just general interest, because you're passionate about it, so are they. It's like making friends. You're going to connect with someone who's got similarities to you in some way. So this is know your marketing. So once you've identified your target audience, there's a whole range of different things you can do to market your work. And again, I repeat, this doesn't come naturally to everyone. Not everyone has the money to do all of this. But these are the things to consider. And knowing who your target audience is will direct you to what specific things you might focus on the most. So knowing where you might find your specific audience might help you to decide whether or not you do a printed flyer, for example, or whether you put your efforts into Facebook advertising. So just to quickly run through this, because I don't want to teach you all suck eggs about what print is and various things, but just to quickly, a few kind of tips on these things. So obviously print, your brochures, your booklets. To have something in print to start with, you need really high quality images of your work. So again, it's revisiting some of the points that Martin taught you about photographing your work. If you're putting your work into a group show or an exhibition, many galleries or organisations will expect you to kind of send work through. If your work isn't high enough quality, there's less likely a chance that it's going to be on the front cover of that exhibition guide, because it can't be blown up to a certain proportion because the image isn't high enough quality. So those are kind of core things that you should be thinking about every time you kind of photograph your work. Consider, how could this be represented, not just in a gallery setting, but also in marketing materials? Distribution. So this is where you might, you've got your printed materials. Where do you want to send them to? What venues does your target audience visit? Could be shops, could be galleries, but it could also be like bars, coffee shops, could be clubs, could be anything. Speak to those venues and ask them if they send their materials out on any kind of distribution networks, and how maybe you can tap into that. So for one example, that I used to kind of use a lot when I worked at home in Manchester, a really affordable one was called Bag Thing. And they used to have these little paper bags full of flyers of like exhibitions going on, film screenings, club events, all kinds of things. But they'd literally make these little paper bags and they'd pop them in little cafes and shops all around Manchester and Greater Manchester. And it's a really affordable way to, put your work with other, venues or artists, and kind of have your work dropped in the places where your target audience might hang out. And it might not be suitable, if you're promoting your work for people to buy, to have in their own homes, that might not be a suitable platform. But if you're organising an event or a workshop or a group show, that's something to consider. Where generally does my target audience like to kind of hang out? Digital, so obviously if you've got a website, your social media, your content creation, editorial, case studies, blog posts, podcasts, there's a whole range of digital things that you can do, but consider the quality of that, and also consider how that content can be reused on all those different platforms. I think we often think we've got to create something new for every single platform, and you don't. Sometimes you can kind of join those platforms up, and that content can be kind of posted on different platforms because you're reaching different audiences. Same with social media. So using that digital content to generate engagement and build new followers. So what are you creating for your own pages? What opportunities are there to feature on others? A lot of artists that I see successful on social media, they support each other on social media. You know, they'll either get together or they'll send work to each other, or they'll comment on each other's work. So in the same way that you find your target audience, maybe kind of look at who's your tribe of artists that are similar, making similar work to you. Look at what they're doing and how it's successful, but also look for opportunities maybe to promote with them. And that can be really playful. It can literally, you know, be sending each other bits of work to review, or to connect on a topic, or, you know, share a product review about something, about a new type of paint or a brush or whatever it might be. Think about how you can kind of connect with other artists to kind of reach a wider audience, because those artists might have a bigger following than you, for example, and that's a great way to just tap into their audience. I get a lot of people, I mean, we find it kind of with other organizations, everyone wants to start a podcast, but it's really hard to gain following. Same with like YouTube channels. And I think before you do that, consider who are the people doing it that you really admire, and go on theirs first if possible. And that way you gain your following before you launch, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
E-marketing. So I kind of say this a lot. I think e-newsletters, so your newsletters, emails that go out to your followers and subscribers is one of the most effective tools to directly reach people. People think it's social media, but it's not, because there's no guarantee with social media until you've reached a point where you're regularly posting content and you've cracked that algorithm that's always changing. E-marketing is one of the most strategic and effective ways to do it. So if you've got a website or a social media page, consider having something where people can sign up to your mailing list. Because in a world where everyone gets a ton of emails and junk that they don't want, actually an email from an artist that they really like the work of kind of brightens your day. It's a pleasure to read. It's not spam, it's not anything. It's actually just looking at something that brings them enjoyment. So consider that that's a good way to kind of really reach the people that you like. And also, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And consider as well, we talk about a lot in kind of marketing and sales, is consider the kind of upward curve of your audience. So you might have an audience, you might have someone who's interested in your work now, who might not be able to afford your work right now. But if you keep them engaged through regular updates in your newsletter, and they kind of get a lot of enjoyment out of that, in sort of 10 years' time, when they're doing better off for themselves, perhaps, they will invest in your work. They will come, they might buy a picture for the wall, they might come to your exhibition because they now can. So value those people that kind of sign up to these mailing lists and your followers, because they will stick with you.
I did a giveaway on social media, and I mean, there's people on my Facebook from all over the world. I live in Lowton, the lady that won the print lived in Golden.
Oh, wow.
Really crazy. So I was like, drop it off. So I dropped it off for her, and since she's probably bought about 3 or 4 pieces from me since over the last 2 years. So
it's surprising, isn't it? Like, so you don't know where like your audience members might end up, and also they're your best spokespeople as well. They will tell somebody about your work. They might have it in the home and they'll tell the friends, and you know, that's how you kind of build that admiration for what you do.
While we're talking about digital stuff, I've got a question from an online artist.
Yeah.
They've said, can you offer some advice in finding your audience when what you do is a bit more abstract? I develop and nurture a symbiotic relationship with the land, more than human, and provide experiences for others to do so through self-directed creativity using artist-made tools. Due to disability, I depend on digital contact rather than physical spaces.
I'd say look for where your audiences are hanging out online. So in terms of those, it might be looking at that particular niche, that digital niche that you've got on. You can go on YouTube and you can look at like where followers are coming from for that specific type of artwork, for example. Look at your analytics of your social media pages. Where are they perhaps coming from? How they link into it? Consider what groups you follow in. So I think on Twitter, for example, you can create lists for yourself, but I think you can look at other people's lists, or you used to be able to. But likewise on Facebook, look for those kind of niche groups and interests. Also look at when you're promoting your work online, look at your tag words and your keywords for what you're posting. Because that's how people will search for like that particular content. And if your work is quite abstract, try and keep your kind of introductory information about yourself quite simple and straightforward, because it's the first thing. Like online audiences they're quite fickle and they have a really short attention span. And I think you've got to kind of engage them quickly in the first kind of couple of sentences of what you're describing. Once you've got them for that, then you can kind of go into the more detail about your work. But consider just how you keep that core message simple in the first instance. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. I'll quickly move on to press and PR. So I think you don't always have to wait to be kind of represented by a gallery or something like that to write press releases. If you've got a subscriber list, write your own press releases for new work that you're doing. It's a good habit to get into, but consider that as part of that subscription list that you might want to start gathering kind of press contacts. What kind of outlets would you like to get into? What magazines, what newspapers? And just send it out. Pitch your work and what you're doing. Look at what they're writing about, and does your work kind of fit with what they're doing? Some magazines and online kind of publications, I know Arts Professional, for example, they announce what their editorial theme is every month. So you can look at that and think, does my work fit with any of this? Maybe I can pitch the work that I'm doing that month and see if they'll, take a feature from me. Sometimes writing about your work and writing about the themes of your work is the best way to promote it, because it puts you in a position of that kind of wider discussion of just what's going on in the world. And if your voice is heard, that's when they might kind of, go through to your website and look at what else are you making. And again, you're kind of tapping into that target audience. Advertising. I think people are sometimes put off by social media advertising. They think it's going to be super expensive. You can actually do a lot for quite a small amount of money. Sticking a £5 or a £10 on a Facebook ad to try and reach that target audience once you know who they are can actually be really, really effective. I think, like you mentioned, kind of you've got people that are enjoying your work from all over the world. Well, something like social media is a great place to kind of reach that audience. And social media advertising, you can target them to do that. And the beauty of that is that you get analytics back. So I'm not going to go super into analytics today because I could spend a whole session on it. But on Facebook, there's tools to look at it, and you can see where people are coming from across the world. You can see whether they're male, female, you can see whether, what age group they are. And that's really useful information because it just starts to tell you like who's actually kind of, getting what I do and enjoying it. So social media. I'm just going to quickly run through like pick your platform. This is just a bit of a quick overview of just the type of audience that are on these different platforms. So once you've identified your audience, it's thinking about where they might live on social media, because having a profile on all of these is really hard work. It's hard work for organisations on our own when we've got a team behind us, let alone an individual. So knowing where to put your efforts is, you know, really valuable. So Twitter, quite contentious at the minute. A lot's going on with Twitter, but it's up there. It's popular with professionals. There's a statistic somewhere that I think the majority of people on Twitter have some form of like secondary education. So it's just understanding that you've got a lot of people on there who are perhaps academic. They've got a lot of voices and opinions that they want to be heard. But it's where a lot of organisations, art galleries, we post our opportunities on there, for example. So it's a good place to maybe just seek out commissions and things like that. It's good for networking. But be conscious if you're on Twitter that because it is very much about, you know, it is your voice. Be conscious of your tone of voice on there, I think, because Twitter has become a bit of a sort of a political space, I think, in recent years. Instagram, generally speaking, a younger generation is on there, but not just. I think it's really great for artists because it's really image driven. And video driven. It's a really good tool for keeping an online portfolio and lifestyle, and it's kind of really useful for like lifestyle content. So if your motivation is to sell your work to people to have in their homes, for example, considering how that work is photographed in lifestyle situations might lend itself really well to something like Instagram, because that's where people are looking for inspiration for the homes and things like that. But equally, if you've not got a website, it can be really quick and easy tool to show people like how you work, kind of your body of work together. Facebook, it's really popular with families, it's community driven, it's good for promoting local events, it's good for finding those groups that your target audience is sitting in. And it does tend to kind of have a more leaning towards traditional audiences, I think because it's been around the longest, everyone's most familiar with it. It cuts across ages a lot more than some of the other platforms. TikTok, again, younger generation, it's video and music driven. It's good for tapping into trends and showing the creative side of your practice. So in thinking about what digital content you want to share, it might be like a day in the life of the studio. It might be a before and after of your work. Those kind of quick little clips can kind of sometimes go viral on something like TikTok. But again, think about how these can connect to each other. So if you're on TikTok, it's quite easy to post that work on Instagram stories, for example, and join up those audiences. You don't have to do that, but it could save you a bit of time. You don't have to keep creating more content all the time.
You got any thoughts on Threads, Kat?
I think, I don't know. I'm in a position where I'm like, let's wait and see what happens. It's owned by Facebook, isn't it? So I think there's something to be said about every platform being owned by the same people. I think wait and see. Yeah, it's individual taste, and I think a lot of actually signed up to it. I was looking at data the other day. I think a huge number of people have actually signed up to it, so it's not worth sleeping on. I think definitely keep an eye on it, and I think there's potentially something interesting in it being a fresh platform because it allows you the opportunity to kind of create a new profile and start fresh. But yeah, maybe, you know, proceed with caution, like with any kind of new social media platform.
I mentioned another one called We Are Eight, which I've not actually heard of. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't actually.
Look into that.
No, I haven't. But again, I think go where you think your target audience is.
Yeah. So
revisit where you think they're at. A few more. So these are, I've not changed my Facebook one there, but LinkedIn, still really useful tool. It's where a lot of organizations are kind of posting discourse about the art sector, for example, where opportunities are posted. We kind of occasionally, like historically, I've had a lot of people approach me via LinkedIn, artists approach us via LinkedIn, designers approach us through LinkedIn. So sometimes that could be a really good tool to kind of reach other professionals and get additional work for what you're doing. Yeah.
But it's people that I've worked with and then my day job previously that I don't know what the word is, and follow each other, I don't know what it is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I've never met them, but it's just people that I've linked up with because of day at work, and then I'd post it like different paintings and stuff on there, and yeah.
Yeah. I think artist work can stand out on LinkedIn because it can be quite a corporate space.
It's different.
Yeah. And I think also, depending on what work you're making, sometimes those corporate businesses do want artwork in those spaces, but they don't know where to look. And actually, by putting that in front of them, you know, it really does stand out, and it provides an easy solution for them to come to you because, you know, they don't have to look elsewhere. So it's again, it's not worth sleeping on LinkedIn. Pinterest can be a really kind of valuable sales tool. A lot of people are on there for like lifestyle content. It's a mostly kind of women platform. A lot of the statistics suggest that most of the women are using it as a platform. So consider, like, again, your target audience, who are they? But if you have a website, for example, you can quite easily link your images on your website to Pinterest by adding pins on those images. So if people are searching for certain things, so if it's, you know, images of horses, landscapes, whatever it might be, you know, if your work is pinned on Pinterest, it could appear there. And there is a sales function on Pinterest. So you can either tap through to your website, or you can like do a buy it now. So it's a really useful tool. And again, it's image led. So similar to Instagram. If Instagram isn't your particular audience, maybe Pinterest is. YouTube, mostly millennial Gen Z users, but it's worth bearing in mind that the most popular content, the most viewed content on YouTube, besides music videos and gaming videos, is video tutorials and educational content. You're artists, you've got a skill, you've got an expertise in something that others don't have, and probably would be interested to find out how to. It's not giving away your secrets, but there's definitely skills that you've got that you could share with other people that, you know, might help you build your following. And again, YouTube content can easily be reposted on other platforms and LinkedIn.
What length of things do you recommend?
Keep it short. It depends what it is, but generally speaking, keep your content short. I'd say under 5 minutes. Unless it's, I think until you've built that following and you've kind of got trusted viewers who you know are coming back and again, short and sweet is the way to go, because people's attention spans just aren't there. And if you can teach them something in 5 minutes, they're going to come back to it because they've learned something in 5 minutes. Yeah.
My attention, like
Yeah.
I've got very short attention.
Yeah. And often if people are searching for something to learn, they're searching because they want to know about it now to probably do it at home. So they want to know quickly. So think about the length, definitely keep it short. So these are just some, honestly, I should have proofread this. Tops for social media. Top tips. Update your chosen platforms and create a consistent brand throughout. If you've got 3 platforms, for example, try and make those profile pictures, your logo, whatever it is, the same on every platform, because it's the best. People won't be able to find you on the other platforms. They won't recognize you. It's keep it consistent. But update everything as well. So if you take anything from today, go away and just make sure everything's updated and it's the same on every platform. Consider setting your own brand guidelines. And I don't mean like writing yourself like a 12-page document about how your branding is, but just consider what your tone of voice is and how that matches across your platforms. Be consistent with that voice and link it back to your core aims. And that's the first slide of like what you're doing it for. Are you trying to sell your work? Are you trying to be educational? What is it? Consider how your tone of voice matches on those platforms. Keep it positive and engaging. Should go without saying, but social media can kind of provoke us sometimes to kind of enter debates. Consider how that could impact your sales, turn off certain audiences. It's best to just keep it positive. If you want to post personal opinions and get involved in more kind of heated debates and things like that, consider having a separate personal platform for that. Because, yeah, it could just turn people off and it's probably not worth the risk.
Selling your art, what you're thinking.
Exactly, yeah. I think it's just professional to keep those things separate. And it's not saying don't be true to who you are. I think you can still be true and be professional and still be passionate about certain subjects that you're making work about. Yeah, exactly. But even then, I think it can be, think about social media, once it's on there, it lasts forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just consider when you're kind of putting stuff out there. And I just think it's best to keep it positive. And if it is, I think people just respond to that a bit easier. So use design and scheduling tools to save time and curate your content. So there's tools out there that can help you save time. So if you have got multiple platforms, or even if you've got one, you can pick a day in the week and you can use platforms like Hootsuite, Later, Canva to design all your artwork and kind of frame all your images for your social media and schedule it on certain days to go out at certain times. And once you get into the analytics of your Facebook, you might start to understand when best to post your content. So for example, if a large portion of your audience is coming from America, you might want to consider posting some of your content when they're awake. So it's just considering that, and you can use tools like Hootsuite and Later to do that, and they also give you analytics back. There's free versions of that, and then there's low cost kind of paid versions depending on where you want to go with it. But you know, we find it really useful in doing that because it just saves yourself time and it stops you kind of panicking, I need to post something else, or making mistakes because you're doing it quickly. Said before, find and follow groups that match your target audience. Post regularly. This seems like hard work, but try and post 3 or 4 times a week if you can, because one post a week on social media probably isn't going to reach people. It just isn't, because of the way that it works. So try and post something. Some of the most successful artists I know repost the same content. Don't think that that's a bad thing, so long as you're kind of giving them something new out of that content each time, or you're talking about it in a different way. Because consider that on Instagram, for example, or Facebook, people are seeing it within a feed of other stuff. They're not always viewing your profile page. So it's, you know, and they love your artwork for that reason. So I think it's just reminding them that you're there. So you don't have to always have something new or like a different image every time, but just post it in a different way. Support others, share and comment content of others you admire, engage with your audience, respond to the comments. I think we forget sometimes on social media, we forget our manners. We don't reply to people, we don't comment back, we don't like back because we're busy. If that was face to face or in a work setting, it just wouldn't happen. But it's your business at the end of the day. So, you know, be polite, reply to people, and give thanks and compliments as well. And ask for feedback. Social media can be a great place to ask for feedback. If you're umming and ahhing over like what direction to take with something in your work, ask them. It's a great way to kind of just get them engaged and excited about what you're doing. And actually they're investing in that work at that point before you've even made it as well. Just a few kind of points on creating content. So considering the quality and lifespan of your work. So again, what platform are you creating it for? A lot of social media platforms default to kind of portrait format at the moment, but that isn't always best for filmmaking. To say, if you want to make a piece of content and you're kind of envisioning, I'd love to make this into a film about my process or the work that I do later on, a profile kind of formatted video is really difficult to edit into a film. Landscape is usually better for that. Consider your file format, your display resolution. Try not to use your selfie camera. It's not as good quality as the back camera. Obviously, if you're doing quick content, it's fine. But if it's considering that lifespan of your content, and as I said before, how you might want to use it again, always think of the quality of it in the same way that when you're photographing your work, you want it to be quality. Framing, as it applies for photographing your work, if you're videoing yourself in your studio, whatever it might be, think about your framing. You can enable grid views on your camera phones or your camera. Lighting again. Stand in front of a window. Avoid having any light behind you. And lastly, audio. Bad audio is like, it can really ruin a piece of content. really ruin a piece of content. Consider investing in like a tiny little mic. You kind of see people, they are quite cheap, you can get them. Or if you're creating a video, record, use your microphone, recording on your phone as a separate, and then match it up afterwards. But also be aware of what's around you. So where are you filming? What's the noise bleed around yourself? Are people likely to come in? Are the kids going to run in? Is the dog going to start barking? Just consider all those things, because it just save you time. But also, there's nothing worse than like going onto YouTube or Instagram and you can't properly hear that person. So part here, just how to pitch your work. And I talk about this quite in the broadest sense of pitching your work, but this is a really useful skill to have for like a whole range of situations that you might find yourself in. So for example, video applications for different opportunities. A lot of galleries and kind of open calls offer the chance for you to kind of send in video applications. If that's something that you want to do and feel like it's the most accessible way for you to do that, consider this. Again, for social media content, networking, even in-person situations, a lot of art fairs and showcase events, sometimes they'll have opportunities for you to kind of go and be part of like a 5-minute pitch your work situation. So consider all of this. Said before, keep it short and sweet. Delivery, speak clearly, concisely, drop the art speak. If you're pitching your work, you don't need to go into the detail that you do of an artist statement. And I think likewise, if you're thinking about your artist statement, keep it simple. I always say, like, keep it, if you're writing something, write it as if it's for like an 11-year-old. You can add in the extra elements, the descriptive words afterwards, if you think it's needed, but start with something that's really concise, because that person has never met you before. They've never done, experienced your work before. Just keep it super simple. Scale and technical requirements, people want to know, like, what size is your work? How is it usually presented? If it's a curator for a gallery, they want to know, like, have I got the means to kind of put this up? What do I need to think about? Do I need to put an extra wall in the gallery or buy some plinths in? Your team, is there anyone that helps you? Do you have an assistant? Do you have, who supports you to do your work? You might do, you might not, but if you do, consider, including them. Audience, going back to who they are. Galleries, opportunities, people want to know how your work's received and who it's for. Consider if you offer any wraparound activity. I don't know if any of you, besides making your own work, also do like artist workshops or work with children or whatever it might be. Mention that, because that's a really kind of, attractive thing for a gallery to know, and it potentially brings you extra work as well, and helps you connect to further audiences. Partners, is anyone funding your work? Has anyone funded your work before? Are you getting any in-kind support? Is someone giving you a studio? All of this kind of shows someone else that you are being supported, that you're worth investing in, basically. Touring, or like kind of exhibition touring, has it been anywhere before? Where have you shown your work before? Doesn't matter if you have or haven't, but mention it if you have. Visual aids, if you're doing a kind of online pitch of your work, or it's a portfolio, use those high quality images, drawings, PowerPoints and films of your work. Going back to that kind of what you're creating content for and the longevity of it, that's why I say consider it, because you might think, oh, I wish I'd shot that piece of content in a different way so that I could include it in this application. Just always ask yourself these questions and be you. People will love your work because they love you. Don't think what you're doing is, too out the box, is a bit weird, because someone will absolutely love that. Be authentic and be yourself. And that's how you kind of make those lasting connections with people. So lastly, here are just some resources just around kind of marketing your work that's useful for different artists. I've put the links for Hootsuite and Later on there. But like, as I said, we'll send these round. So do go on here. Some of them are kind of direct to some tools. Others are like platforms that regularly post different kind of content. and tips on how to market work online, how to sell to different people, how to shoot videos, for example. So thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, thank you. Thanks everyone online. Thanks for coming.